Today we're going to talk about the hiring process and how to become a cop. Hey guys, what's going on? I hope everybody had a fantastic week. Thank God it's Friday. I am very happy because I have today off, tomorrow off, Sunday off. Thoroughly plan on enjoying my weekend. So I decided to reach out on my YouTube community page, a little status update that YouTube has, and I wanted to ask you guys for your ideas on video topics. So Ready to Hunt posted what to expect throughout the hiring process, Academy and FTO program. And honestly, the Academy and the FTO program should probably be their own video because each one of these topics could probably make a full 10-minute video. So for today, we're just going to talk about the hiring process. So let's say that you want to become a police officer. Number one thing people ask me all the time, should I go to college or should I just jump straight into it? And this is a very good question because a lot of departments don't require college. My biggest recommendation to people getting into this line of work is if you have the opportunity to go to college or you are young enough where that's an option for you right now, do it. Hands down, do it. Even if a department doesn't require it, a lot of departments require some level of education, whether it's an associate's or bachelor's, once you start getting into the ranks. A lot of departments require you to have a bachelor's degree before you can be a sergeant, before you can be a lieutenant. So unless you just want to be a slick sleeve officer for your entire career, would definitely recommend going to college. Another question people ask me is what kind of degree would you recommend getting? I will tell you guys from personal experience, having a criminal justice degree, I have seen this time and time again. Having a criminal justice degree when you get into law enforcement or while you're in law enforcement, which I wouldn't recommend going to college while you're a cop, it's a headache. Criminal justice degrees in this field are a dime a dozen. Everybody has them. Every officer that's in school right now is probably in Troy or Phoenix, and they're all taking this criminal justice program online. If you really want to stick out above the rest, my recommendation would be to get something along the lines of psychology. If you get something with psychology or something with like computer science, you're going to kind of stick out from the other people that are just taking their regular criminal justice classes. The good thing about those colleges though is a lot of times they will count the credit from when you went to the academy and put that toward your degree. So you can cut out a lot of the hours having to go to college. However, like I said, I would not recommend becoming a cop and then going to college because it's going to be really difficult, especially like once you start getting older, you have families, it's not easy to do. So if you're young, you're 18, 19, you have the opportunity to go to college now, go ahead and do it now, get it done with, get it over with. You are not going to regret it. People ask me this question all the time, so I figured now was the perfect opportunity to answer that. So next, let's say you either have your degree, you don't have your degree, but you don't plan on getting one. You want to become a cop. What is the first initial step? The first step is to meet with a recruiter or go down to the HR department, whatever jurisdiction you're in, and pick up an application. Pretty simple. The application is going to be very detailed for most police departments. You're going to have to list, some police departments go by 7 years or 10 years. It's usually not any longer than that. But they're going to require some sort of history for the past 7 or 10 years. And it's going to be every address you've lived at, every job you've had, when you started it, when you ended it, education. There's a ton of questions, family members, references. These applications take a long time to fill out. So my biggest recommendation is when you fill out this application, make sure to get copies of it in case they lose it. So that way, and I've said this again in another video, if they lose your application, you can slap another one on the desk, be like, here you go. The biggest thing to keep in mind during the application process is that the government takes their time. Nobody in government is in a rush to do anything, whether it's state and local, whether it's federal, whether it's tribal. Nobody's in a rush in government. And that's, I say that loosely because a lot of times it just takes time for those processes to go through. But it's a lot different in the private sector than it is in government. So the biggest thing to remember is just try to maintain some patience. Have some patience. This whole hiring process is not going to happen in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, usually. There are people that have applied with a department and it's taking them a year to do this entire process. So as long as you have that in mind, just like I said, have some patience. You don't need to call the police department every day to check on the status of your application. That's just going to annoy them. If you want to call them, maybe call them once a month. If you haven't heard from them in a month, maybe you can call them then. I think that would be kind of appropriate. But calling them every other day, finding out what's going on, is really just going to annoy them. Usually the longest part of the process is the background check, because usually the recruiter is the one doing the background investigation. Now when he gets 10 packets, 10 applications in, he has to do 10 separate background checks. He has to talk to teachers in high school, he has to talk to your old neighbors. That gets very time consuming, especially when you have 10 people, and that's only 10 people. Some larger departments have more than one recruiter. They can kind of assign them out, kind of like they do cases in CID, and it makes the workflow a little bit more smooth. But in smaller towns to medium-sized towns, you don't have that. It's usually just the recruiter that's going to be doing it. And real quick on a side note, let me also add that I'm not trying to bash small police departments. I would not apply for super small police departments though. There's a few reasons for that. Number one, you're probably not going to get the training and experience that you will need to keep yourself safe, really. There's departments where there's only 2 or 3 people that work the entire department. You have a chief, and then you've got like a sergeant and an officer. Usually those are the towns with like 1 red light in them. And again, I'm not trying to badmouth those departments, but usually places like that, you're not going to get adequate training. They're not going to send you to a lot of additional schools and courses and stuff. Some places do. Some places are awesome and they're small. They have such a low call volume that, you know, you can pretty much do whatever you want. But if you want adequate experience, I would recommend applying to a department that has at least 70 sworn officers. I would say 50 to 70 sworn officers. If you want to apply somewhere that has 10,000 sworn officers, like NYPD, which I think they have more, I don't know, then great. Yeah, hats off to you. Me personally, I like a medium to smaller size department just because the camaraderie. You get to know everybody, you know people on your other shifts, you know all the officers in your department, and it's not like that when you work in a place like Atlanta PD. There's just no physical way for you to know every single officer that works in your department. And some people like that. I mean, some people are just there to do their job, and I'm usually just there to do my job too, but it's still nice to be able to socialize, you know, with other people. So let's move on. So you've got your application filled out, you hand it to the recruiter. Now what? Now is kind of the waiting game. If the recruiter is interested in hiring you, usually the next step, he's going to set you up with a date to take the written exam. The written exam itself is not hard, but most written exams consist of either logical questions or reading comprehension. And what I mean, what's the difference? Logical questions tend to be more of a scenario-based question. And reading comprehension is basically just giving you a bunch of facts and then it's asking you a question about one of those facts. So an example of a reading comprehension question might be something along the lines of, in Georgia, when a driver reaches 75 miles an hour or higher on any 2-lane road, or 85 miles an hour or faster on any other road in the state, they qualify for what's called super speeder. Super speeder is an additional $200 to your original fine plus 6 points on your license. Joe Schmo was going 78 miles an hour in a 4-lane highway heading westbound on whatever the hell. Does Joe Schmo qualify for super speeder? And again, this is a very easy question, but it's just an example of something they might put on the test. That's an example of the reading comprehension. Now something logical might be something along the lines of, Officer 1 and Officer 2 respond to a domestic threat. Upon their arrival, there are 2 subjects that are actively arguing. You are Officer 1, your partner is Officer 2. Officer 2 meets with the male, pulls him to the side. What would you do? So logical kind of makes you think about stuff like that. So, and you don't really, most of these questions, you might be intimidated because you're going to think that you have to have some sort of prior law enforcement experience. And you don't. Most of the time it's just really common sense type questions. Some departments are going to require you to do math, but not many. Usually federal tests require a lot of math and logical reasoning. So moving on, you have completed your written exam, which usually takes anywhere from 2 to 4 hours. What's the next step? The next step is going to be a psychological exam. Usually they will set you up with an appointment with a therapist sometimes, or sometimes it's just taken somewhere random, and you take this 200 to 400 question psychological exam. Most of the questions on there will eventually at some point get repeated. So keep that in mind, guys. Usually there's only between 100 to 200 unique questions. Even some of those might be pretty similar. But at some point they're going to reword a question you might have seen way early on and might not remember, because they want to see if you're going to change your answers. Are you telling the truth? If I can offer the biggest piece of advice going through this process, be honest. Lies are very hard to keep track of. They have been doing these tests for so long now. That's what weeds most people out. are people lying? And I'm not trying to toot our horn, but the police are good at telling when somebody's lying. So if you come in there and you think you're going to be slick, they will catch you in the process. I promise you, and you'll just get declined. So once you've taken your psychological exam and hopefully you pass, next comes medical testing. Usually this consists of having to go to a doctor. You might have to turn your head and cough. And the doctor's going to check things like blood pressure and cholesterol. They're going to check a whole list of things to see if you are fit for duty. Another thing they might do is they might give you a color blindness test. This is kind of where I was screwed before, luckily. Anyway, long story, but I am very colorblind. I am on the scale, I passed like 1 out of 24 on this test. It's called the Ishihara Test. It's a big circle with a bunch of dots. They put a number in there that's like slightly different shade than the other bubbles in there, and you're supposed to be able to see the number because somebody that's not colorblind will see the number. So after your medical testing, usually next comes Polygraph. I've done a video on Polygraph. If you guys want to check it out, check out some of my other videos. I go a little bit more in depth into it. I'm already 17 minutes into recording. I'm sure the video is not going to be that long. But I wanted to kind of speed this up a little bit. So the polygraph is going to measure a bunch of different things, how much you're sweating, your pulse, blood pressure, a whole bunch of different things. Then after the polygraph is usually, or sometimes before the polygraph, you're going to have a fitness test. This could be anything from running a 1.5 miles to a 220-yard sprint, or both right after another. Sit-ups, push-ups, they might have you do a step test, they might have you do an agility test where you have to run in and out of cones. They want to make sure that you're fit for duty. For us, our agility test is they have you sit in a patrol car. When they blow the whistle, you get out of the patrol car. You run, you have to run around a corner, you have to jump a fence, you have to jump through a window. You have to run around a few more corners, then you have to pull like some 150-pound person across the field. But that's just one test. That's one test. You might still have to do a 1.5 mile run after that. You know, they might give you 5 or 10 minutes to catch your breath, and then it's off to the track. Then that's pretty much it, guys. Usually by the time you're finishing all these tests and everything, that's usually when the recruiter is wrapping up your background check. That's usually when they're like ending phase of it. They've already talked to everybody they need to talk to. They've ran criminal histories on you. They've learned everything about you. So really at that point, that's kind of when they take everything together, you know, your test results, your medical exam, what they found on the background, and they have this like panel that learns everything about you, and then they call you in for your final interview. Now keep in mind, the panel interview has already been educated on everything about you from the recruiter and his findings on the background check. So keep in mind when you go in there, they probably already know a ton about you, but they're going to pretend like they don't know anything about you. Number one is to see if you're going to lie about something. Number two is they want to kind of ask you some questions and see if you answered them the same way you did on your application. Another thing the panel interview will do is they'll probably give you some scenario questions, because they want to see how you personally would handle a situation, especially with no law enforcement experience whatsoever. The key to this is there's really no wrong answer for these questions. Whatever comes to your mind that sounds best, that makes sense to you, answer it that way. Don't change your answers. They don't want to see any uncertainty in this interview. So, and they might even mess with you a little bit. They might give you a question, you answer it, and they're listening, and then they might get mad about something. So wait. So you're gonna do this, but you're not gonna do this. And they'll seem confused, and that's when you panic. You're like, oh shit, should I have? Well, I mean, I could do that right there. Right there is when you lost it. Stick to your answer, articulate why you chose that answer, and stick with it. That's our job as cops. Our job is to make a split-second decision and then be able to articulate why we did that. The moment you change your answer, you lose your whole case in court. And that also applies to the panel interview, because if they're going to be hiring people that change their answer, they're not going to make very good cases on the street. So hopefully that makes sense. Stick to your answers, make sure it's a good answer, but stick to it and be able to explain why you chose that. And that's it, guys. The last step after that is final offer of employment, or conditional offer of employment. And from that point, off to the academy you go once you have been hired by your police department. Hopefully they are the ones sponsoring you, or maybe you put yourself through and you're already ready to be on the road. Which leads into FTO. That will probably end up being the next video. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining me today. I know this is actually a pretty lengthy video. I've been recording for 22 minutes now. I'm sure it won't be that long, but that's a pretty long video for me. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you had a wonderful, wonderful week. Please enjoy your weekend. Please be safe. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you guys very, very soon. And don't forget about Black Rifle Coffee. Let me try this in my best radio voice. Check them out at blackriflecoffee.com. Use promo code ThinBlueLine. That was horrible. My voice, not the coffee. The coffee's awesome.